Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for lowpost.com, and I'm back again with the next lesson in our Scratch Essentials tutorial series. And today we're talking about nodes. Nodes when working with effects. Now in this lesson, I want to start out by talking about some fantastic free effects, or shaders as they're also commonly referred to as, that you can download to work with inside of your Scratch timelines. Then what I want to do is move on and talk specifically about why working with nodes is different than working with layers, but how you're definitely going to want to choose when to work with one as opposed to working with the other. And then I want to wrap things up. I want to talk about how you're going to be able to get in and cache effects that you can get real-time playback when you're creating the looks that you need in your timelines. All right, now before we get rolling, I want to talk about some great free shaders that you are able to use inside of your Scratch products. And we actually have Autodesk to thank for this. I'm just going to Command or Alt and Tab into Google Chrome, and as you can see, I'm on the Autodesk Flame page. Now Flame works with shaders called Matchbox shaders, and as a version 9 of Scratch, Scratch supports those same shaders as well. So to find some free shaders for you to download, you can head on over to Logic, that's Logic with a K-matchbook.org, and download as many of these shaders as you want to, or there's a great single download right here, download a zip file to download everything. Now what's important to keep in mind is that when you do download everything, they will be in one single folder just with all of the filters or shaders listed in there. Now what's important to keep in mind is that when you get into Scratch and you go into that category, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit, you will see that they are all, again, just in one massive folder. So what I've done, just to make things a little bit easier, is I've actually come into the shaders folder and I've just divided them up into different folders. Now what's important to keep in mind is that you're probably thinking, well, I've downloaded this now, where do I actually take these and quote unquote install them? Well, we're not actually going to install them. We're just going to direct Scratch to look for them in a certain place. Now, of course, I have them on my desktop. You can place those shaders wherever you want to place them on your computer because, again, we're just going to point Scratch to where they are. Let's Command or Alt and Tab into Assimilate Scratch. I'm just going to come to the System Settings, and right down here in the bottom left-hand corner, there is the Matchbox Plugins folder location. So you can simply come in, set that to where you want to have Scratch find them. I'm now just going to cancel out because I already have it set. I've just created us a new project for this lesson called Working with Nodes. I'm going to enter this project. I'm going to import a clip. Let's just come to our bookmarks to the desktop. I'm just going to grab this clip right here. We're just going to say open. It's got a different frame rate than our timeline. I'm just going to say sure. I'm just going to come over here. We're going to drop it in. I'm just going to remove all those empty slots. Let's now head over to the Color Effects module. I'm going to come over to our plugins. And you'll now see, and I'm just going to come all the way back up to the top and just twirl everything up here just to make our lives a little bit easier here. You will see that in the Matchbook or the Matchbox shaders, there they all are divided up into their separate folders. Okay. Now let's get in and let's talk about the big difference between working with shaders or effects at the layer level and working with them at the node level. Now the big difference is that when we come in, and I'm just going to take one of these here, let's actually cancel out of this just for 1 second. I'm just going to add a new version. Okay, and let's work with this new version, and we're going to apply a shader to a layer. Okay, and it really doesn't matter which shader we use. I'm just going to come to plugins. Let's come to our Croc category because they've got some great effects in here. And I'm just going to come down and let's just choose a defocus effect. Okay, so we're going to apply this to the layer. Now once it's on the layer, we can see it right over here on the left hand side of the screen. And I'm just going to come in, we're just going to twirl this up just to give this just a bit of a defocus, bit of a blur there. And now the thing is that what I'd like to do, even though this plays in real time, you can actually see that it's not quite playing in real time, which is actually kind of good. It's what I was hoping that it would do. What I'd actually like to do is I'd like to render this out or cache this file so that I can then get in and add different effects on top of it and actually get some real-time playback. The problem is by working with filters, effects, shaders, at the layer level, you'll see that if I come to the media parameters and I try to come over here to cache this input, I can't actually do it. Now I can render the shuttle, but remember, we just want to cache this out quickly for us to then get in and add more effects and to do a little bit more complex compositing work. Now to get this parameter, the cache input, to appear, we have to start working at a node-based level, which was pretty much how I wanted to work in this lesson anyways, but I just wanted to show you one of the big differences between working with these two methods. Now, to be honest, I was always a big fan when I started out working in Scratch of working with effects at the layer level, but to be honest, now I work with everything at the node level because I just find it just to be just a much more easier, fluid way to work. However, there are certain situations where what I will do is I will attach layers to nodes and work with effects that way, and you'll see what I mean by that in just a second. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that version that we had over here in the versions window on the right hand side of the screen. And let's now get in and let's talk about working with nodes. Now, before we do anything, what we're going to do is we're actually going to add a node to the workflow that we're working in. So I'm going to head on over to our node tree. Now, I want to draw your attention to the fact that we actually have two ways of viewing nodes. You'll see over here that I have the ability to look at things in a hierarchical way, or I can look at them in tree mode. Now, right now, I'm going to be working most of the time in tree mode, but I'm going to show you the differences between these two workflows in just a second. Now, much like working in the canvas, I can use the same shortcuts to zoom in on my nodes and we can just reposition them. I'm going to position this node right dead in the middle of the screen. All right, so let's get in and let's apply a filter or a shader to this node. Now, the process, whether you're adding them to layers or nodes, is exactly the same. I'm going to head down to plugins. I'm just going to stick with our Croc shaders for right now, and let's just do a CRT effect. Okay, so there's CRT, and what I want to do is I want to apply this to a node. Now, as soon as I do, you'll see the immediate result on the screen. I can hit the space bar, and depending on the shader, you'll see we're actually getting pretty darn close to real-time playback out of this, if not real-time. There we go. That's looking pretty good. All right, now I'm just going to head back to my versions for just 1 second because I do want to point out the fact that when you get in and start applying shaders or filters as nodes, you'll see that we get this puzzle piece that tells us that something is going on with this version, that we've actually applied an effect to this version. Now, back in our node tree view, I want to come over and just show you the hierarchical view so that you can see this represents our clip, this thumbnail right here. The thumbnail above it represents the shader that has been applied to it. Okay, now this is pretty much the way that the hierarchical way works. I want to work in tree mode, or tree view, so I can show you really how this is such a much better and much more dynamic way of working. Okay, so this is our main shot. What's going to happen is that every time that we apply a node to this shot, a node shader, it's going to be applied above the main shot, almost like it's sitting directly on top of it. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. We've applied this CRT effect, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to give things a little bit of a glow. Now, what we have to figure out is where do we want this glow to come in the chain? Do I want the glow to come after the CRT effect, or do I want it to come before it? Well, I want it to come after it, so I'm going to make sure that I have the CRT effect selected. I'm going to head on over here to our plugins. Let's now come down and find a little bit of a glow in here if we have one. Maybe an exponential blur might do the trick. I'm just going to select that. We're going to apply it to the node. You'll see that's a little bit too much. Let's just undo what we just did. I'm just going to head right back into our plugins, and we'll just find an easy one here. Let's go with a lens blur. Okay, I'm going to select lens blur. We're going to apply it as a node. Okay, now you'll see it's applied above our CRT effect. So there's our main clip. There's our CRT effect. And there is our lens blur. Now you'll notice that really nothing has happened. Well, that's because we haven't come in and dialed the effect up at all. So as I start dialing here, you'll notice that things are going to go out of focus when I let go of the mouse. So keep in mind, shot, CRT effect, lens blur. Okay? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove that lens blur, because what I'd like to do is apply the lens blur before we apply the CRT effect, just to show you the difference. I'm going to come back in here. There's our lens blur. I'm going to apply this as a node. You'll now see that the lens blur is actually applied here. I'm going to give it a bit of a blur, and then I'm going to add the CRT effect on top of that. So you can see how the stacking order is exceptionally important when you start applying these nodes. Now keep in mind, these are all still applied to the one version of the shot. Very simple, very straightforward, no extra layers, nothing. Okay, let's now head back in and let me show you how this works when adding layers to our shot. And I want to show you what it looks like inside of Node View. Now I'm just going to remove these shaders here. Whoops, let's just make sure we say yes. Perfect. All right. Now this is one way of working, a very visual way of working when working with layers. Let me show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply an effect that I would actually apply as a layer. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to head back over to the left side of the screen and I'm going to come down to my plugins. And I'm just going to use a Sapphire plugin. Let's just drop down Sapphire because I'm going to come into the lighting category. I'm going to use that lens flare. Now I'm going to apply a lens flare as a layer. Okay? So let's apply it as a layer, and I want you to watch what happens over in the node window. You'll see something that's a little bit different. What is going on here now? Well, what we have is the lens flare, the layer that the lens flare is applied to, and the shot that it's now being composited over top of. So think of it this way. All of your layer effects are always going to appear below the shot. All of your node effects are always going to apply above it. Okay, and I'm going to show you how we can do a little bit more complex effect in just a second. Now, why would I apply a lens flare as a layered effect or shader and not as a node-based one? Well, let me show you. In this situation, you'll notice that we get a little bit of a compositing problem with the actual flare itself. That should be actually bright and sort of a little bit blown out. Okay, let's just move this over just so that you can see it. I actually want this to be white like it would kind of be like in the real world. What I have the ability to do when applying these shaders as layers is I can come in and use transfer modes. I'm going to do that as a screen transfer mode, and that's looking a little bit more like what I would expect it to look like in a real world situation. Okay. So let's now take this concept to the next level. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and we're just going to remove, let me just delete the actual layer just from over here. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply what we had just done before. Let's actually get in and let's apply that blur. I'm going to come back into plugins and I'm going to come back to our Matchbox. I'm going to come back into our Croc shader section and let's come down. And let's just see if we can find another unique one that we haven't tried yet. I think a light leak might be a little bit too much. And maybe we'll go with let's go with an old TV look. Okay, and I'm going to apply that as a node. Okay, there's an old TV look, looking very nice. Let's come back down here. And the great thing is, again, look at this. This is practically playing in real time. Okay, so let me now add a lens flare to this composite. Now, how you might think that I'm going to do this is I'm going to come in, I'm going to select the main layer. I'm going to come back down to my plugins. I'm going to come to Sapphire. I'm going to come down to lighting. I'm going to select lens flare and I'm going to apply it as a layer. And you might be correct except for one problem. What's happening now is that when I come all the way to the top to look at the final composite and I select our main composite there, that old TV look, you'll see that our lens flare is actually being applied below everything else. And what we'd actually like to do is not apply the lens flare as a layer to our main shot. We'd like to apply it as a layer to our shader on the top. So let's come down. I'm just going to remove that layer. I'm going to select our old TV effect. And what I'm now going to do is come back to our plugins. I'm going to come back to lens flare. I'm going to apply that as a layer on top of that node. Now you'll see what's happening is two things are happening with this node. One is our main shot is feeding the node with the effect on it. The other thing that's happening is a layer is attached to it that has our lens flare on it that we can now, of course, come to the front parameters, come in, apply it as a screen transfer mode, and everything is now looking exactly the way that it should. And I can hit play on the space bar to play this. Now, here's the great thing. I say the great thing, and it's not so much the great thing, but what's actually happening now is something that I wanted to have happen, which is this is not playing in real time. Okay? I'm going to stop this because this is where we can get into caching. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the lens flare because, to be honest, I really don't need the lens flare on there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply another effect beyond this filter. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to cache what we have so far so that when we add another parameter or another shader on top of it, we're going to get real-time playback. So now to cache, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to Media, and you'll now see that because we are working with these effects at the node level, we now have the ability to cache this input. And you'll see that the cache time with this shader is actually super fast. 243 frames in about 20 seconds. And when it's done, what we're going to do is we're going to head in and apply another shader on top of this. Now keep in mind, when I played this back the first time, it did not play in real time. So what our goal is now is just to get in, apply something simple, and get it to play back in real time. Now, once the cache is done and I hit the space bar, we are going to get real-time playback. There we go. Boom. No problem. Take a look at how it's playing there. Awesome. Let's come back now. Let's make sure that we have our old TV effect selected. I'm going to come back to plugins. Let's just twirl up Sapphire here. Let's come back to my Croc effects here. Why not? And I'm going to come down. We're just going to apply a halftone effect. We're going to apply that as a node. Of course, it is going to be the topmost one. Let's just shrink our shot down here just a little bit. I'm now going to hit the spacebar, and you'll see that we're getting real-time playback again, even with halftone applied, because we cached that old TV look. We're now getting in and getting real-time playback. And we could then, if we're applying more shaders, keep caching as necessary to get the real-time playback. Now, something else that I do want to show you, and that is at any time what we have the ability to do, you'll see that as I stop this here, okay? I can come through and I can click on this layer to see what the old TV looks like. I can come down here to see what the original looks like. But if I ever want to lock this off so that the only thing that I'm going to see as I'm adding nodes is the final output, I always have the ability to lock the viewer here. So now if I select any of the other nodes, I'm not going to see what's on them. I'm only going to see what's on the topmost node, the one that I have locked right now. And as always, what I have the ability to do is if I want to, I can come in, do our little split screen, and take our original shot, drag it onto the right-hand side so that I can see the difference between the before and the after of the effect. So this way the client will always know exactly where we were and where we're going. All right, now as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowpost.com/forums. And if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com.